The first will be from me when I'll be giving some introductions about partnerships and what we're seeking to do with the Impact Round, and then Jen MacArthur from Toronto Municipal University will be making some presentation of the municipal side. Michael Ross from Yukon University will be joining us to talk about Indigenous partnerships in the North. And then I'll be returning in terms of talking about business partnerships with Positive Energy at the University of Ottawa. So what we've done is that I've identified three very notable partnerships that are very deep and enduring, that are in these three major kind of groups that we're trying to engage with: Volt-Age, Indigenous, municipal, and then with business. And of course, there are others in terms of civil society. But this will be interactive as much as possible. So we won't do introductions, because I think if you want to, please do that in the chat and introduce yourself so we know who you are, though we thank you for registering. And I'm going to go right into an opening set of remarks so we can put that on there. So let's see if I am technologically literate to find my presentation. There it is. Thank you. Okay. So in terms of opening, I just want to affirm that, and people will see this very shortly, the scientific committee, as Andreas knows, will be looking at the criteria for the call very shortly, and that will move through a process that will shortly be issued in the next few weeks. And the thing I really want to emphasize is that we're talking about partnering for impact. I mean, the emphasis will be on impact and decarbonization. While there may be research outcomes, and there should be research outcomes related to that, the focus is on impact for decarbonization. And so what we'll be speaking about today is really making sure that Volt-Age is supporting projects and living labs, and there'll be some different cadence to how these will be considered in the Impact Round, which you'll hear more about soon, but how they're collaborative, affirmative, and effective. And that's what I hope to speak to in my opening comments. And then in each of the profile discussions, we'll get into it. And after each one, we'll stop for discussion. And if anyone at any time has a comment or a question, just put up your hand and we can go right to that. We don't have to wait to the end of presentations. So Catherine, I'll go to the next slide. So apart from my end, looking at how collective understanding and commitment for embedding decarbonization partnerships, so what I'm hoping we achieve out of this is that the group on this call and those who watch it later really understand that how these are essential components to the Impact Round. It is very unlikely that we just lost the screen there, Catherine. Can you bring it back? Okay, I'll go to the next slide. Thank you. I want to be really blunt with this slide, and after that, I'm going to stop for comments or questions. Even with the seed round, we've seen challenges with this. And too often, partnerships are just statements, and are they material? And here's what we find, what we don't want with the partnerships in the Impact Round. They can't be simply passive or consultative communications with external parties, asking them for letters of support, for example. That's not what partnerships for Volt-Age represents. Or, in fact, general statements of collaboration saying, you know, here's the organizations we're collaborating with. It has to be much more substantive. And even where there are expressions of in-kind support that are immaterial, so, I mean, they have to be material to the project, material to the research work. And fundamentally, I mean, the partners are not serving research for this. You don't want partners serving research. We want research serving community needs. That's what the focus of CFREF is. That's what the focus of Volt-Age is. And that includes having defined impact, not non-defined impacts of decarbonization. Further, we're looking for partnerships that are really not just one-off or term limited. So it's not just for this project or this activity or just for the next year or the next 2 or 3 years. We're looking for some things that are much more enduring, so that as a result of the Volt-Age project, they endure and they have ongoing impact that has scalability and replicability. And so rather than research outcome centered, we want research outcomes, but we want to focus on societal decarbonization impacts that allow research outcomes to be material. So very much this is societal led with research coming into it and achieving both of those objectives. In addition, you know, if proposals come in with limited or lacking impact metrics and narratives as to exactly what's going to be achieved, it probably won't receive a very high rating in the Impact Round. And finally, there's also times where there's a statement of partnerships intent, but they never launch. And so one of the tests that'll be, I'm sure that the independent reviewers will look at when they receive proposals is to say, is there clear evidence that the partnership is already launched? That would in fact be the best. Or there's a very high likelihood that it's launched, because if it doesn't launch, you don't realize decarbonization impacts. So let me see if there are questions or comments on that. I'm being quite blunt and provocatively so, but what we want to make sure that partnerships, and I'll go to the next slide in a minute, which will talk about what we want to see in partnerships, but I want to be very clear that these are things we don't want to see in partnerships. But let me see if there are any questions or comments. Comment from Olivia or question? Olivia, you're on mute. Okay, all good thumbs up. Thank you. All right. All right. Any other comments or questions on this particular slide? All right, I'm going to go to the next slide and then stop again. So what do we want? One of the most effective things that a research partner, principal investigator, or co-PIs can do is to demonstrate in their proposal that the research is directly responsible to community or partner research needs. And the more specific, the better. And so that there's demonstrations where the community, the partner, and it could be partners, I'll come back to that, that are saying, here's what we need. And this really affirms the situation of guiding research, of society and community guiding research. And to the question from Annabad, yes, this can be in electricity resilience projects as well, as long as you can link it to decarbonization. So, electricity resilience can be in the abstract of saying, okay, we want to make sure electricity exists. But if you can prove that electricity resilience projects is actually contributing directly to decarbonization, then I expect that the independent reviewers will consider it. There's a great book called The Speed of Trust that Covey wrote. And the main message in The Speed of Trust is that it doesn't happen fast. Here's my litmus point. For those of you that have life partners, married, non-married, common law, whatever, that's the trust and deep relationship. That's what you need to seek out here. Not people that you're going to get married to, but almost. Because that's the level of trust and partnership that really is honest, that's really fair, that's equitable. And so the more you can show that trust is being built, and we acknowledge that some we'll come back to this towards the end, some partnerships maybe exist and they're being expanded on, others will be new. Those are fine. But demonstrating how trust works is really important. Gets to point number 7. How is trust transparent? How is there ongoing and project research collaboration? So, and also being proactive. So it's where there is co-creation in the research design. And it may be that in the impact round proposal, you can say, we've agreed to the goals, and here's how we're planning to continue to work together to sharpen them to how the research will be applied to the needs of the community or the project of the Living Lab. That's okay. We understand that not all things are decided and done before you submit a proposal. But being shown that you've been proactive to reach out to partners that are really material that need you, and that you're designing the process together, both the initial design in the research proposal, but also how we'll move forward going forward. I'd also say, having familiarity with Indigenous communities, that some of you know that I do, data sovereignty is going to be very important in terms of, but yet data is needed for researchers. So how do you balance this? How do you balance where data is owned by communities? Or some cases, how do you matter how intellectual property is owned by the universities and not owned by business? These are things that are going to have to be figured out in the proposals themselves. So what you're trying to do is balance off the respect for sovereignty of data, for example, even Indigenous traditional knowledge, which is also a matter of sovereignty and data, but also looking at how intellectual property is protected. We will be following intellectual property norms on the materials in the call that laid that out. And the research we're looking to see is that it's material to impact at scale. Impact at scale is a venture capital term. It's a finance term. It basically says if you invest in one particular project, several happen after, or several hundred happen after. And having been a venture capitalist in the past, I can say to you that in fact does occur. So if you say, look, we're going to get involved in microgrids in this way, or we're getting involved with energy storage in this way, or we're dealing with the built environment, or we're dealing with the needs of Indigenous communities, showing how the project you're working on is, ideally is one of several, because you may be working intensively with one project, but you may have other potential projects that can learn from this that will use it that are part of the collaborative. That's really a good thing because you want impact at scale, which is replicability and scalability. And that maximizes the decarbonization impacts. So look for those opportunities that really create that impact and scale. And as I mentioned, the transparency issue. Joint decision-making on research focus. So demonstrating in the proposal that you're saying, here's how we make decisions. But not all questions are answered at the time of the proposal. We definitely will understand that. But being able to show that your governance structures will allow for collaboration, so there's joint decision-making between you and partners, particularly a prime partner or two, in terms of how research will evolve and how you communicate as well. How do you communicate with any published material? How do you communicate in the media? Those are things that should be subject to joint decision-making. This affirms this kind of, if you would say to your partner, well, I'm going to be communicating, your life partner, I'm going to go out and communicate and tell people how I'm going to spend our family budget, you would expect that you talk to your life partner beforehand. Well, having made mistakes like that before in the past, I would say that wasn't a good idea. So it really needs to show that the collaboration is there and joint decision-making. And we also acknowledge whether things that the researchers will do and things that the partners will do, there has to be joint support and commitment to the partnership processes. They take time, they take some money. And this is allowable in the Volt-Age requirement. Having meetings, having support for convening, having support for coming together, those can be part of the expenditure paradigms. So these are the kinds of things that we're identifying what partnerships should be. So let me stop there and open up if there are questions or comments about that. Yeah, I'm going to say that Olivier is going to give me a thumbs up, but I'll keep going with that. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide, which is an infographic. Actually, Michael, go back to you. You just raised your hand.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. I just wanted to ask, because you stressed as well a bit the point of the co-creation design.
Yeah.
And is there, I know that there are still not out the guidelines for the new proposals, but is there attention to, or will there be a criteria for the Living Lab stream or the impact stream to describe as well the creation of the proposal? Because I think it's a rather important point, and I totally back what you say. Mm-hmm. But it needs a lot of preparation, and it needs time to build the trust, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah. I would say this, and this is a moving target, and I think we have to be conscious that some things we're not yet privy to share, but will very shortly. And in fact, the scientific committee will talk to it in a minute and next week, and I may ask Andreas to comment on that. I would say this from what I understand, and it is a moving target here before we finalize things, but I will say this. What I think the proposals for projects and living labs will seek evidence that partners have been involved, especially a prime partner. There's usually a prime partner, maybe one or two, but a prime partner where they have reviewed the research plan. They have made comments on it. They are giving evidence that it meets their needs in terms of what they're seeking to do. And there's also a recognition that some partnerships will evolve over time. So some partners may come in later with a project. And even with the Living Labs process, we'll likely have some initial living labs that will be called for, and living labs that we realize need more time with partnerships that will be kind of opened up later next year, mid next year. So there's a recognition that, you might, when you look at the call, you may say, well, I'm ready to go right now. I have a partnership. I can expand it to apply to this. Here's where we want to go. And here's the evidence that my partner is on board with the research plan that we have. That's what we're seeking. You may decide, though, to say in your proposal, saying, well, we have this with our partner, but we intend to build more of our collaboration going forward. And in some cases, there'll be a later call, shall we say, that's expected, particularly with the living labs. There'll be two calls. There'll be one immediate, one a little bit later, that gives time to build partnerships. So that's some of the ways we're grappling with this. But I wonder, Andres, if you have any comments about this. But I know we're working in live development here of the whole process, so I want to be conscious of that.
Thanks a lot for explanation.
Andres, any comment on this from your end as chair of the scientific committee? Okay, we'll get Andres back in a minute. I know he's been having bandwidth issues for a few weeks. Let's go to the next slide. If we are seeking impact with decarbonization, fundamentally, we are avoiding or reducing greenhouse gas emissions in some way, shape, or form, directly integrated, but certainly with the linearity that shows evidence of impact. So keep in mind that the Volt-Age reached the pink, which is the Volt-Age Initiative Research Project component, has to show evidence of what project or living lab you are seeking to affect, which is the larger circle, and then the partnership you have with a proponent, which may be, or proponents, which may be Indigenous, municipal, business, which is your partnership. So the kind of thing as you would naturally say, someone might say, well, look, here's how we're looking to, expand microgrids in remote communities that are diesel reliant, for example. And we do, so here's the range of projects we're doing this with. Here are the 2 or 3 we're focusing on. Here's what we're going to do in terms of Concordia and partner universities in terms of your research contribution. And here's the project partnership you have with partners that together in that partnership, there'll be material for that research to be used in a project, because research is necessary but not sufficient to achieve decarbonization impact. So that's what we're trying to portray here with this infographic, so that people understand that it's research is material, but we're looking to have research outcomes that lead to decarbonization in impacts. And that's why we have a larger project, and that's why we'll be seeking partnerships. Let me stop there to see if there are questions or comments. All right, obviously I'm exceptionally brilliant, or people are just saying, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but let's go forward. In fact, the next point is discussion questions. So I'm going to leave these open in terms of you asking these questions or other questions in terms of, how can we have existing or substantive partnerships leverage and enhance, because there are existing partnerships. So that's good. What focus or intensive needs to be undertaken? And to your point, Michael, this takes time. So that's why there may be an evolution on a project proposal or a living lab proposal that would show that with other Indigenous and municipal NGO, civil society, or business commercial partners. And how should Volt-Age projects demonstrate the high likelihood of achieving stated decarbonization impacts? Keep in mind that we are not unambitious with this impact call, and there will be a future impact call. Because what we hope to achieve is to show impacts that are so definitive that, in fact, we convince the funding agencies to expand Volt-Age beyond the first 7 years undertaking. Because we know these are generational changes. They're not going to happen fast. So keep in mind that we're being ambitious here, because we can show with the impact call and partly the seed projects and also the living labs to come, is that we can show that here's how decarbonization has been achieved with communities, different kinds of communities, then our chances of getting a renewed funding line post the first 7 years of CFREF are higher. So then this gives more time for research to be truly impactful. That's the end of my remarks. I just want to see if there are comments out there that people may have or questions. I'm going to add, in terms of the percentage of cash with an industrial partner, there isn't a definitive percentage or number yet. Obviously, the key issue, and I'll go back one slide if you could, Catherine. The key issue with this infographic is how much money will be spent for the whole project. Let's look at a concrete example. Let's say in a world that I know, let's say that we're looking at diesel reduction microgrids with renewables and storage in Northern Canada, and we're doing it with 10 projects, partners together. In doing those projects, they're going to cost somewhere in the range of 10 to 20 to 40 million each. So the question is, where will that money come from? I mean, the money came from partners, it may come from government, it may come from technology partners or business partners. So what we'll be looking for is some sense of comfort that the amount of money needed to implement the whole project, not just the research portion, is available. And certainly it is desirable if there's a contribution from the partners into the research component. But the bigger comfort level will be, is there enough money in contribution from the partners and also then the Volt-Age contribution to actually achieve the whole project, so that both research is achieved with research outcomes, but also decarbonization's impact is achieved because projects are implemented and then can be replicable and scalable. And so that's what we'll be seeking evidence of. I hope that's helpful, Limited. All right. I'm going to now let's get down to some specifics of project work and on this side. So we're going to close your slide on this one, Catherine, so you're not sharing anymore. And I want to hand her over to Jennifer McCarter from Toronto Municipal University, Metropolitan University rather. Jenna, if you could introduce yourself. I know you spoke at one of the thematic workshops that Andreas had organized, and really speak to this issue of building a partnership ecology. And again, questions, comments from people in the chat or with your hands raised would be welcome. So Jen, thank you so much for doing this, and I really appreciate your time and commitment to what you're doing.
My pleasure. Yes, so Chris asked me to speak about the way that I've been approaching building partnerships, and maybe a little bit of background. I have the advantage that I was in industry for 15 years. 5 years here in Toronto before I became a faculty member. So I do have the benefit of an industry network, although in fairness, all of the partnerships that I've leveraged through my seed fund and I'm working to leverage for the impact and that came to the impact proposal were actually since I became a prof. So I'm going to throw this up. You guys can all read, but I basically want to go through a little bit about why we build partners and then some strategies for how to actually go about doing it. So these are basically all of the words in my whole slide deck. I don't believe in words because I want you to listen to me. And hopefully the visuals will help you to really understand what I'm talking about. So there's a famous YouTube video, TED Talk called Start With Why. And it's really talking about how Apple kind of changed the game for kind of just selling laptops. It used to be that IBM would be like, you need a laptop, and here's all the features that our laptops have, and here's why you would buy our laptop because it's better than the other laptops. And when Apple started doing their marketing, they're like, okay, so imagine the things that you want to do. And they really stuck it with like, well, why? What do you want to do with it in the first place? And partnerships are very much the same way. I think we as researchers, it's very easy for us to go, hey, I have this thing that I want to research. And we really think about the what, but true partnership starts with the common why. If what we're saying really appeals to what other people are thinking and we're actually aligned with the way that they think and our values are shared and our goals are actually pointing the same direction, it winds up actually being incredibly easy, like shockingly easy to create the partnerships. And I want to kind of look through that a little bit. Right. Once you have the why, then you can figure out the how, like kind of what are the things that we're going to do, and then you can really define the what in terms of like the tangible deliverables, the tangible outcomes, all of the nitty-gritty. But I think it's really important to start with that bullseye, despite our past training that might have trained us to kind of go from the outside in. The inside out is always going to be a lot more powerful. Right. And like I said, it's the shared vision, shared values, and shared objectives is really, really important in this.
Yeah, I mean, if I might comment, Jeremy, I really love this. I mean, I know exactly the TED Talk you're talking about. Look, it built one of the most valuable companies in the world, and that's why Apple keeps doing what it does and making as much money as it does. And companies that do this have really understood why. And so really this is perfect. If you keep that target in mind, and Andreas, if you want to speak a bit more in terms of the work you see in Concordia and in your work, that's please come into the conversation.
Yes, yes, Chris. Nice slide, Jen. So just by coincidence, I was in a European Union Horizon information session. As you know, Canada has joined the European Union Horizon program, and this is the approach they are using: the why, how, and what.
Excellent. Always glad to see that
Yeah.
spirit in common.
Yeah, I was at a dinner last night with the Canadian Science Policy Conference, and Minister Champagne was there, and he spoke of this at some length. So the Horizon Partnership demonstrates this. So great going, Jen. Keep us rolling.
All right. So here's a bit of context. So this is the partnership that I built for the seed fund, and I'm just going to go through a little bit. I'm going to keep coming back to this. So I was introduced to Ursula through Stéphane Chaillet, who actually heard of me through an industry partner on a project that I've been doing that I'm hoping that I can bring into an impact project. I do digital twin stuff, but that's kind of beside the point. So we talked about her Tools for Cities work, and I built the original 2030 platform for the 2030 district here in Toronto. And I built it with EnWave, the City of Toronto, and Purpose Buildings, or at least the guys who would go on to found Purpose Buildings. So you can already see kind of where some of that common ground comes in. And Arcan are people who've been doing a lot of these archetypes that we knew that we would need to come in, and I knew the team from some previous work that, again, we'd done with that 2030 platform. Natural Resources Canada had expressed some interest in funding the Volt-Age projects, and this was one of the ones that they had said that they were interested in. And then RDH Building Science with Purpose is one of the two big consulting firms, the two niche consulting firms that specialize in building energy models. And I knew that through them, first off, I'm friends with the principal because I've known him from back when we competed for the same work about 15, 20 years ago. But also that I know that they had a lot of energy models. They do a lot of work in terms of the energy performance gap. So if I wanted to get access to extrapolated data from a lot of energy models for Toronto buildings, I knew that between the Purpose Building and the RDH teams, I'd be able to have that. We also have a district energy perspective, which is how EnWave came to the table. And the City of Toronto, I've actually done some work with them in terms of their net zero existing building strategy. And I know full well that they're struggling to figure out where to be investing in retrofits within the city to have the most bang for their buck. So calling up the people at that organization, specifically running the retrofit group or the existing building group, I'm like, hey, I want to develop a tool that's going to help you. This is what we're thinking. And we said, you know what, the new buildings group actually could also use this tool, and they actually have some other simulations, some surrogate models that they have. So I actually wound up working with both sides of this. So that's a little bit of context on kind of my own partnership for the seed fund. But let's talk about some concrete strategies for actually building these partnerships. So first off, let's think about the stages, right? Partnerships are evolving wheels effectively. So you'll have an entry point into a partnership, and that's always going to come into a scoping and discovery stage. And that's where you really try and figure out, like, what is it that we want to do together? What is it that we could do together? And where do those overlap, right? There's things that you want to do that you can't do. There's things that you could do that you really have no interest in doing, but there's going to be that little overlapping phase, and that's really where we want to be placing our projects in that sweet spot. Once we've actually defined the problem that we want to solve and the scope of what we want to do, then we can go to planning, we can start activating. This is where we're writing our proposals together, and we're actually starting to launch into the project, assuming that we're all successful, which I really hope we are. Then you go into a phase of fostering the relationship, and that's about nurturing the relationship. It's about maintaining and ongoing building of the trust, knowledge sharing, information sharing, clear communication. You have a lot of facilitating, and you take the time to reflect. How is this partnership going? What else do we need? Is there anybody else we need at the table? Are there other elements that we really need to consider? That if we don't consider them, we're going to be, maybe getting into an issue and not having the time or the space to actually finish the project because we're missing a critical piece. So there's a lot of that reflection in terms of what we need to keep the partnership going. And then as we start to deliver, really reviewing that partnership. What's working? Are there things that need to change? Do we need to maybe adapt what we're doing? Is the partnership going to evolve? Sometimes partnerships evolve and we're beyond our need for that. I did 6 years of rural development in India between my master's and coming back into consulting. And I worked myself out of a job. I did the previous 10 years of wish lists of projects for this NGO, and they didn't need me anymore. And it wasn't a negative partnership. It was a, you've done everything we'd ever hoped that somebody could have done, and we kind of don't, like, we don't actually have any more problems that we really need an engineer to solve. At which point I was able to go over. Whereas in other cases, it's a rescoping and a rediscovery phase that actually comes out of that, of how can we go on to the next level. So with our seed partners, we're in this fostering, facilitating, and reflecting phase, because of course we're doing the work together. And as we look ahead to the impact, it's okay, how could this evolve into an impact project? How could this actually look? What do we need? And do we need to have more people entering into this partnership and go through a broader co-creation, scoping, and discovery phase? So how the heck do you find partners, right? Not everybody has great networks. Now, if you do, you can shake the network tree, right? So you go in, you raid your network, you see who you know, and you see who's working in these areas. Are they former classmates? Are they people you've met at conferences? Are there research connections? Are they industry connections? Are they past research partners? Are they some of your alumni? Maybe former students have gone on to be placed. We have all sorts of networks that I think sometimes we as faculty members don't recognize that we have. And sometimes it's very easy to make those connections, and those connections I think are really what it takes. So if you have an introduction to somebody, if you already have some sort of connection, and if you're active on LinkedIn, you may have hundreds, thousands of connections that you can actually go through. And it's fairly good to be able to search through and figure out what that is. So this is how you can start to identify some potential partners. But what if you don't have a lot of connections? Well, then you would use a snowball strategy. And if you've anybody who's done any sort of social science research for lit reviews, you find your great sources that are really helpful, and then you figure out who they know. Who have they cited that might be helpful? What are some other sources I should look at? And this is the same sort of thing. So I called Rayanne Miller at the City of Toronto. I said, hey, Rayanne, so this is this thing that I want to do. Who is the best person for me to talk to at the city? And she goes, oh, you want to talk to David? Let me make an introduction for you, right? And this is that kind of that snowball connection. And this is how I met somebody on the other side of the house who I actually didn't previously know, who has now become a very helpful partner for one of the projects. So this idea of snowballing and connecting and kind of working your way through and taking advantage of other people's connections in a non-exploitative sort of way. Right. And I think it's really important to be clear with the people who are asking for the introduction that they understand why you're asking for the connection, because then they can make what's called a warm introduction for you, making it a lot easier for you. And that is the last one, is the warm introduction. Sometimes it's not a matter of maybe a direct work connection that they have and they're introducing to somebody in their own organization, but maybe it's a friend that they have, or they know somebody who knows somebody. And sometimes you can arrange for somebody to make a warm introduction through a third party and say, hey, would you, this person's doing this really exciting work, would you be willing to connect them to this other person? And I think in this case, it's always really important for transparency. I err on the side of ruthless transparency. So I tend to go in telling people exactly what to expect. When I was fundraising for the lab, I would say, okay, so I'm going to give you a presentation on the lab, and then I'm going to ask you to make a contribution to the lab if this is exciting, if you want to be part of this. So if you want to keep that in the back of your mind, you can think about what that contribution could be. And then people will be like, oh, okay. And it's shockingly, people in industry don't tend to be put off so much. I think they actually appreciate things being frank rather than people beating around the bush. And you know that they want something, but they're unwilling to admit it, which is a bit of a pet peeve of mine. So how about project alignment, right? How can we be part of these important partnerships? Well, if you know that somebody has a problem and you know that your research could potentially be the missing piece, you don't even necessarily need a warm introduction. You can get away with a cold introduction. I have done exactly that. When I was in practice, I called up the head of a particular vaccine company and said, hey, we just saved your competitor $5 million through a new energy optimization tool that we have. Do you have some time next week and I can talk you through how we could save you $5 million too? And they're like, yes, come in, right? Or we're looking at for municipalities. If a municipality has passed a strategy to achieve net zero, right? City of Toronto said we're going to achieve net zero by 2040 now. I was lucky enough that I was actually on the advisory board. I knew all the ins and outs of that. I knew all the pieces, but I was also like, I know the questions that we weren't able to solve in terms of the how. So how can my research become that missing piece? So if you can actually come and offer that missing piece, and this is where you need to listen to the beneficiary needs. From years in development, the thing that I learned is you can, if you go and give a solution to people that they don't need, it's not going to be helpful. There's a great joke of development of a guy who goes and lands his helicopter in the field of sheep, walks out, goes up to the shepherd and says, I bet you I can tell you exactly how many sheep you have because we've got all these special satellites and all this sort of stuff. And the shepherd's like, that? He goes, yeah. If I'm right, you have to give me, I get to take one of your animals. He's like, sure, fine. He goes, he did some little gadget. He goes, you've got 6,432 sheep. And the shepherd goes, yeah. So the guy grabs the animal. Because wait a sec. I'll make you a counter bet. Bet you I can tell you what you do for a living. And he goes, okay, sure. He goes, I bet you work for the World Bank. He's like, how do you know? He goes, you come, you interrupt my day, you tell me something I already know, and you don't know what you're talking about. Now give me back your dog. All right. I figured it can be a long day. I've been at it since 5 a.m. Right? But if we do have that piece, if we are speaking to felt needs, it makes a difference. Another alignment strategy is to hitch your wagon to an existing project, right? What can you do with a project that's already existing? It's already going to happen anyway. But boy, is it a great opportunity to take it to the next level and actually achieve something more by being part of it. So great example of that. I was at the Toronto Low Carbon Sprint earlier this year. We decided that thermal energy networks, we need to do a pilot for a thermal energy network in Toronto. That's going to be finally how we start to, stop nibbling around the edges, but take a really big bite out of gas usage for heating. We found a project that is already going to happen. They've already got an way of talking to the Atmospheric Fund, talking to a major developer in an area that we think, just looking at the map of what's there, has the potential for a strong thermal energy network. They were already talking about doing something, but they don't know what. We've had a conversation with them, and now this is on the table as could this become that pilot that we're looking for. So it's an existing project, and it's very, very easy to go in and just add that missing piece. So that's another strategy that we're really thinking about. And then the last one is, I think the other one that Chris has been alluding to, is the co-creation. What if we got the team together, we found that we're in a space where we know that there's things that we need to do together, and we can actually build up the project a piece at a time and take that. And some of this is some of little bits of what we've had with the conversation with NRCan and City Retrofit, is we said, okay, we're planning on doing this, but like, did you know that we're doing a national retrofit modeling study? Now we're actually in the process of trying to figure out what the retrofit should be and how to extend all of our archetypes to consider the retrofit. So I'm like, that's pretty much what we were thinking we should do. So we get to skip the first 4 steps of the project because they've already done some of the inputs. They get to skip the last half of their project because that's what we were planning on doing. And now, rather than us having to deal with all of the logistics of trying to work with an NRCan system that we're not familiar with, we can give them the inputs, they can implement it, and we can spend more time doing research and less on doing, frankly, fighting with somebody else's tool. So sometimes these co-creation, and then this can expand and turn into other things as we continue to have more conversations. But this organic development, this obviously takes the longest amount of time, but even making space in a project for these co-creations to emerge, I think could be really interesting and hopefully feed into future impact projects. So that's me. I just wanted to kind of give up a few slides and a few thoughts. So for food for thought, and I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can all see each other.
Great. Thanks, Jen. I have questions, but let me open it to others and comments, though I do recollect the helicopter joke, and I'll have to use that again. That's a great line. Well, I'm going to jump in quickly on this. But also just some context. One of the partnerships I formed 30 years ago when corporate sustainability was first starting. And so we started a partnership called Excel, which was Excellence in Corporate Environmental Leadership at that time. It's now grown. It's now part of business and social responsibility, includes a lot of research functions along the way. But it grew over time. So your point about how that circularity, the stages, the four circles of it, it was a concept where the company said, we aren't sharing what's working and what's not. And I recollect the first meeting at the Chateau Laurier here in Ottawa, and the VP at the time, John Roberts from Noranda Forest, his opening line in this meeting, the first 7 companies were together. He goes, last month, my company was charged with 171 environmental violations by regulators. Obviously, we're doing something wrong. How do we fix it? And we actually had Chatham House rules, so that was all confidential in the room. And now that partnership now has existed for almost 30 years. It's 30 years next year. And and then what we brought into it, we also identified where research was needed, and I collaborated several times with different universities saying, in terms of corporate sustainability, you're something we don't know, and we need some input here from there. So I really like this kind of longevity where partnerships are evolving. But I wonder if people have comments about partnership relationships that they built when they reached out to them, or questions about, I want it to be helpful here as you're thinking about the impact round, about how you build partnerships. So if people have questions about how they can take further to some of the examples that come from Jen in terms of both the ecology side, the direct approach side, the cold call side, if anyone has questions about that, or if you wish to share partnerships that work for you. This is a collaborative process here as well. So we're looking to learn from each other if others have something to share. Let me open it up. So I'm going to put some people on the line here. Prag, I know you've been collaborating closely. We had a partnership workshop about 4 or 5 months ago, and one of the organizations that presented was the Pittavik Landholding Corporation from Inukjuak, and now they're collaborating with some work related to electrification of transportation. I wonder what you might share, how your relationship with them has grown, and how you're building that, which may end up being an impact round project. I know it will, but we'll find out. But how have you experienced that?
Yeah, so this is one of the cases where it actually is very similar to what has been presented here in how it has started. So this community have their own electrical power generation. I think it's the only one in northern Quebec that has that. And they are now selling power to Hydro-Quebec. They generate about 7 megawatts and they use about 4, and they're thinking of investigating electrified transportation so they can reduce their dependence on oil. Now, how we are helping them is that there are a lot of issues associated with electrified transportation that the people that are selling them are not always upfront about. And this is where we're helping them, trying to decide whether to go, for example, all electric or hybrid, what sort of vehicles to choose, what are the other needs of the community, and so on. So it's an example where our research in electrified transportation has a direct bearing on the needs of the community. So it's actually starting with the needs of the community and bringing our expertise to that community. So we have a project that we're working on right now, a proposal that has recently been submitted to the Quebec government on buying some vehicles and testing them at this community. And the idea is to then extrapolate that result to other communities, especially in cold climates. That's one of the problems with electrified transportation, or at least electric vehicles. Electrified transportation also includes hybrid vehicles. So, so it's in a partnership that has started with the why. Why look at some of these issues? They have this excess power they want to reduce because they have to ship that oil in and diesel in, and which is they can only ship it in during certain times. So that's one partnership that is evolving, and we plan to submit an impact to look at some of the research aspects. So in the Quebec government proposal, it's largely more testing and evaluation, but there are some research aspects as well. One of the issues that I was also bringing up was the issue of recycling of batteries, which is not a well-developed technology. And we visited Lion Electric just this week, Monday, up in Mirabel. And they are building batteries, manufacturing them. And this is a subject of battery recycling has come up again. And just this morning, I had another conversation with the professor. So that is how that's evolving. And it really came from the needs of the community. Another example is I showed one time the CEO of Opal RT, which is a company in Montreal, my lab, and he took one look at it and he said, my God, I didn't realize that we have such a well-equipped lab right here in Montreal in North America. It competes with many of those in Europe that he had visited. And he immediately proposed a project which we had the expertise to do. And at the conclusion of that project, they formed an entire division in their company selling that product that, the research resulted in a product. So those are some examples of partnerships. I think the successful ones which have been mentioned here are the ones that originate with the partner, the needs that they have, and then bringing in the expertise that we have.
Great. Thanks very much, Brent. Any other comments about you? Michael, you work a lot in the institutes you have there with different partnerships. What's really worked for you? What's the partnership you're most proud about that's been the most impactful for decarbonization? And maybe been around the longest. Which ones did you go with? This is the slam dunk partnership. Is there one that you can point to?
I think the ones, as Jen pointed out as well, with the communities directly, like to collaborate, like with the mayors or with some community organizations to identify together the urgent needs and to support them from the facilitation through the decision making, through thinking beyond standards and then adjusting this and doing this with the right people together, with the affected ones and the ones who can make a change. I think that's the most interesting projects. So directly, for example, with developers on the ground or with a borough together, and then I think one very thrilling one is indeed this from the seed funding from Volt-Age to work with international different communities together and to understand as well the cultural differences and to understand their influence of decision making and providing solutions from our side. So the kind of the co-creation looks everywhere a bit different. The trust building. It's everywhere slightly different, and this needs some sensitivity and adjusted facilitation. So this tailored topic, like more and more we figure for us it's not about making a pilot for pilot's sake and demonstrating something. It's more like to understanding as well the potential of scaling or transferring it, and how we can deal in such a direction and to convince people and to showcase them the pluses and minuses. So this is the next step, I guess, from the beginning of the project with co-creation, then after the project or the realization of taking it to the next step and seeing how we can transfer it to other communities or to other partners and going with them the next step, but still staying with the old partners and optimizing it. So I think that's this project cycle in general, this to create these long-term partnerships. You described it as well, like as being married, and I think that's the art of it, to stay together after the project, right? Like it doesn't finish with a publication or with having a test bed checked, but then to think the next step, because this could accelerate massively the next developments. And so the first project or the first approach pilot is most probably the most cumbersome, and the next ones, it's much more you understand the other person much better and can resolve things much more efficiently.
Thanks, Michael. Andres, I'll go to you in a second, but Jen, let me put you on notice, and I'm going to come back to you with a question about the work you have been doing, the partnership work versus the research work, because finding the time and space to do that hard work is tricky. So I'm going to ask you to comment on that momentarily. But Andres, over to you for a question or comment.
Yeah, I would like to give the example of our collaboration and partnership with Hydro-Quebec through an NSERC Hydro-Quebec Industrial Research Area. There are some other partners, also Calmed Energy from Enercam, Regulvar, which is a big Canadian controls company, and one smaller new partner. So that's now a 15-year relationship, so it has been quite long. And we just attracted a new partner through an NSERC Alliance grant of $2 million for the next 5 years. So we were just meeting yesterday, actually, and I told them about developing some synergies with the CFREF. But there, we listened a lot to the needs of Hydro-Quebec, and basically, they rely on us for developing data-driven gray box RC models for buildings. And we are also together active in ASHRAE to get that approach adopted by the building design community. We had the related meeting of Volt-Age with some consulting engineering companies just a few days ago. So in the case of buildings, it's a very complex ecosystem. If you consider the manufacturers, the utilities, then the various players, municipalities, developers, very complex ecosystem. So very often a big decision is how many partners to include from the value chain. Probably Jen must have seen that big question. If you make a partnership too big, then it starts becoming, you may get conflicts between partners. So optimizing this has been a challenge. But in the case of Hydro-Quebec, it worked very well because we listened to their needs. And we have really emphasized developing the area where we are strongest and applying that knowledge to real buildings, real case studies, okay? So here I'll come to the case studies. The case studies, they are use case studies. So in all cases, they are also kind of a partner, but not a formal partner. So the city of Varennes, through the Varennes Library, is one use case study. So that was a project emphasizing our proposal for CFREF as a cutting-edge project. The mayor of Varennes always is proud of that and talking about that. So we use it as a case study, but also a school. There is a school, all-electric school, and there are some other buildings. In those cases, we have what I call a loose partnership, okay? We have an inner circle of the close partners, and then in the case of the use partners, they are also participating in many design meetings and workshops, but not at the same level as the inner circle. So this is one approach that I want us to think about, especially with the impact projects and living lab projects. We could have a core of very close partners that really participate in the development of all the research aspects, and maybe another outer circle that can come during the project. Maybe some of them may not be there at the beginning. It could be demonstration partners that do have a significant contribution, but they are not involved in everything because it's very complex. I'll give you the example of the school board. There is a very good engineer in the school board.
So you the last example, Andres, then I want to go to Jen.
Yes. So how we define demonstration partners and use case studies is going to be very important in both the impact projects and the living lab projects. That's something we need to think about. I mentioned some of this to the Volt-Age team and to the VPR. So it's an ongoing discussion.
That's good.
And there was, okay, Amin asked one important question about resilience, resilience-only projects. I would agree with Chris here that ideally we want resilience with decarbonization, not resilience alone.
Right.
To achieve big impact, ideally we want both resilience and decarbonization together. This will be an issue of our CFREF grant. The more projects where we look at both resilience and decarbonization together, the better it is.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jen, over to you in terms of the work and partnerships, and to Andres' point of having different layers of partnership.
Yeah, so, and this is where, so I came out of, I was a project manager in industry. And at the end of the day, when you're a project manager, you need to be building relationships. And you also want them to be multi-party relationships, right? So on our grant, we have a lot of different relationships, right? I've got my relationship with my co-PIs, right? Trying to connect with Ursula as well. Probably more often, we should probably connect more often than we do, but it's all because it's incredibly encouraging when we connect. But connecting with my co-PIs, connecting with my collaborators, connecting my PhD students and postdocs on the grant, or the other faculty members, PhD students and postdocs on the grant. So there's kind of that internal collaboration that we do as academics. Then there's connecting to the other partners as well. So it can be all sorts of different things. In industry, we always called them client touches, is where I think, so sometimes there's natural points where we've made a breakthrough. We've started to make some progress towards something that we know is helpful. And then we can say, hey, last time we were talking, you said it would be helpful for us to share this. We're now at a point that we're ready to share. Here you go. Shall we set up a meeting to discuss? I think a lot of, well, I'll just speak for myself. I have found that my research has been more successful when I see myself as a research practice leader rather than just a researcher, right? My job as the PI for my project, or for and the leader for my research group, is to go out and build those partnerships, to maintain those relationships, to provide the research leadership and guidance for all of the HQP who are working for me, and make sure that they're doing the right things so that I can meet with them for like an hour a week, and then they spend the other 34 hours a week actually doing the work that then advances the research of the project. So I'm there for kind of leadership and quality control, and that gives me the time by delegating. You know, as much as I would love to muck about in the research, the reality is that strategically, me spending my 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 hours a week, whatever it is, actually attending events, building partnerships, going out to speak at panels. I was speaking on the future of, or like building performance reimagined for CIBSE. And it was a good excuse to invite partners out from some of my research and say, hey, I'm speaking on this panel. I know it's a topic that's interesting to you. Here's an opportunity. And then we can kind of connect kind of in person outside of that. So it doesn't even necessarily need to be related to the research. Sometimes it's something as simple as saying, I know that this is something you're interested in, and I wanted to share this with you, or I saw this great article that I thought of you. You know, that those little things, it's how we build business in industry, and it's how people on the industry side are used to people building relationships with them. So using those tools I find can actually be really helpful, but also just making a point to have regular status meetings and check-ins. You know, as I saw when you were speaking, I very quickly realized, you know, note to self, I need to email somebody who I had sent a proposal to a month ago, make sure that do they need any more information? That sort of stuff is just something that I can do to keep this alive by actually having that conversation with them. So I think it's a matter of making the time and being deliberate. I probably spend about 4 hours a week to building and maintaining partnerships between myself and my research group and other people who are strategic partners or groups. And sometimes it's a lot more than that, depending on what's happening. But I think it's something that I think we as PIs really need to think about. And I think it's something that nobody's ever trained us to do. So, but if we think about it as kind of a business development hat and client relationship management hat, to put it in industry language isn't dirty, it's really, really effective. That I think that can be a good way of looking at it, because it helps us and almost forces us to be more strategic with how we're communicating, who we're communicating with, and why we're reaching out. And even as simple as, before you send an email, trying to figure out what it is that you're trying to achieve with that email. Is there a particular action that you're looking for them to take? Is there something, are you simply just trying to nudge yourself back onto the front burner if they're incredibly busy and you're just trying to get them to make some space in their calendar for you so that you can actually move things forward? Or whether it's an explicit information sharing or whatnot. And of course, always being diligent to answer them and answer their requests, and not letting the tyranny of the urgent get in the way of the really important work of partnership building. So.
That's a great
Probably plenty of talking for me for now.
That's really good. Before I'm switching, and also thank you, Jen. Any questions for Jen before I introduce Mike Ross? So, Jen, I want you to thank you for coming on board with another Volt-Age webinar. We very much appreciate it. Thank you being part of the seed round, and it's quite appreciated. I mean, I think the more we can learn from each other, the better we are as from a research standpoint. In my case, from the Indigenous communities that I serve and the partnership role I have with Volt-Age. So I'm going to switch here to introduce Michael Ross, who's on the you see him on the screen. Michael and I have known each other for a few years. We've been on panels together looking at energy futures in northern Canada. And Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself more fully in the role you have at Yukon University. And then you're going to take us through the presentation deck you have, which I think people are going to find fascinating because it really reaches out to the northern and the Indigenous world, which is so important to defining where we are in Turtle Island and what we call Canada. Michael, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And thanks for the invite. Very nice to see everybody. I guess a little bit of background about me. My name is Michael Ross. I'm the Industrial Research Chair in Northern Energy Innovation at Yukon University. I was born and raised in Scarborough in Toronto. Did my undergrad in electrical engineering at U of T. My master's and PhD in electric power system engineering at McGill University, so right down the street from Concordia. J'ai travaillé à l'Institut de recherche d'Hydro-Québec before moving up north, so I have a little bit of utility experience and lived in Vancouver before, now living in the big city in the north. And I moved up in Whitehorse about 8.5 years ago. So so I mean, a lot of the work that we do. Actually, I'll get into that, but just the reason why I bring that up is I don't feel like I'm too different. I'm for many people here, I'm originally from down south. I had to learn a lot moving up north. At another time, I'd be happy to talk about more in-depth experiences, but right now I'm just going to talk about our program that we have. So let me just share my screen. And by the way, Chris and everyone else, if anything I say is a bit off topic, please feel free to reel me in just to make sure that what I talk about is pertinent.
No problem. I'm not known for being shy, so I think we're okay.
Excellent. Can everyone see my screen?
We can.
Excellent. So in a nutshell, our program at Yukon University is funded and directed by the electric power utilities across the territories as well as BC. So that includes Yukon Energy Corporation and Naco Electric Yukon in the Yukon, Northwest Territories Power Corporation and NACA Power in Northwest Territories, Quebec Energy Corporation in Nunavut, and BC Hydro's non-integrated areas in British Columbia. And our main core funding comes from the utilities leveraged against NSERC, Tri-Agency, and Natural Resources Canada. So what we do is our job is to essentially lead a program that meets the needs of industry, but it's truly driven by communities' needs, fostered through academic partnerships, and leveraged with government ambitions. It's a lot nebulous. I guess the equivalent that I would say is we are here kind of like the research branch for the northern remote communities where there are no economies of scale. That was the original structure of what we were trying to do. So we don't determine our research program direction. Essentially what we do is we work with the utilities and ask them, what keeps you up at night? And then based off of these problems, we're focused on solving problems. We're not here for driving solutions or pushing solutions. We want to make sure that it's practical and pragmatic with everything that we do. Now, the last time we did this exercise was in June, and this is essentially what they said. Like it looks like sticky notes because it was sticky notes, but essentially the topics that we do to make sure that we're working on relevant topics is integrating renewables. How do we do so without affecting system stability and reliability? We're looking at the impact of electrification of heat and transportation, and is our current infrastructure capable of handling the large adoption of electric vehicles? Grid modernization in terms of smart grids, microgrids, demand-side management, distributed energy resources, and how that could play a part through the energy transition. We're also looking at policy and outreach, and we are not here to drive policy. We're not here to push policy or influence policy. We're here to inform policymakers. So we are a higher education institution, also funded through the federal government. We are not here, we're here to be the transparent, unbiased broker. And so we're here to provide information that's rigorous so that policymakers can make informed decisions. And then finally, the business approach. And when I say business, it's not how could utilities make more money. It's more along the lines of they're recognizing that their business is changing. Beforehand, they used to provide a commodity. 60 hertz, 120 volts, whether you're in Concordia or whether in Montreal, whether you're in Whitehorse, you're going to get the same product. But now utilities are finding that they have to make strategic decisions that take into consideration social justice, carbon reduction, sustainability that hasn't been part of their strategic business plan. So how do they incorporate that in a responsible manner while still being accountable to ratepayers? And also for business approaches, what is the best, say, approach for best bang for your buck on making those trade-offs? Because if it's the cheapest option we're being pursued right now, we wouldn't need to have a discussion around social viability, on social justice, on carbon emission reduction. So where does that trade-off lie? So that being said, while that gives us the structure and the governance of our program to exist, but truly we are accountable to 4 key stakeholder groups. Industry through the electric power utilities, communities, oftentimes Indigenous communities, Indigenous governments, Indigenous ECDEV organizations, and remote communities. Academia, both in terms of I'm an employee of UConn University, I'm also accountable to our students to ensure that they have the best training possible to set them up for succeed for their future career and ambitions, but also academia in terms of everybody here, so that way we could create something greater than the sum of our parts. And then government as one of our key funders. And one of the things that I find is we are of value to any one of those key stakeholder groups because we have strong, trusting relations with the other 3. So as an example, if I'm speaking with academia, the way that we can provide value is that we have very strong partnerships with industry. We have very strong, trusting relationships with communities, and we could leverage opportunities with government funding. We are valued to government because we have strong relations with industry, strong relations with community, strong relations with academia. And I could go through the entire thing. So our job is to serve. It's not us coming up with problems, not even us coming up with solutions. It's we need to have our finger on the pulse and ensure that the work that we're doing is relevant. We are here to ensure that the work that we're doing gets accepted, and we are in the business of trust. I just jumped on when Jen was talking about doing a lot of work on building that trust. That is my number 1 job. I'm here to build trust with communities, with industry, with academia and government, because if people don't trust me or don't trust the work that I do, it's going to fall on deaf ears, it's going to sit on the shelf with no actual impact. So we need to make sure that the work that we're doing is serving our stakeholders. So it's not my problem. It's not about me. It's my job to adapt to ensure that the work that we do is relevant. We do so by having 3 key value propositions that are driven through our expertise, our experience, and our position. What I mean by that is we are experts in remote electric power systems engineering. We could use that to develop an applied research program to meet the needs of the industry, of communities, and de-risk technologies for northern and remote applications. We have through our expertise, we have worked with many different communities, many different First Nation and Inuit communities on their renewable energy projects. And with every new community that we work with, we bring that experience so that way we're not prescribing best practices, but we could talk about experiences of what has been successful in the past and if there are challenges that are being faced, what different options are available. And through the knowledge mobilization, we are a higher education institution who better to provide that knowledge mobilization aspect than an educational institution. Now, that being said, we are not the only ones to do that. It's not about us. It's about providing the ability and the platform to provide that knowledge mobilization. Some of our technical work is a power system impact study, where even though I brought up the framework of utility-driven mandate or utility-directed mandate, a lot of our work is driven by communities. So, for example, there are many communities, and Chris knows this better than I do, about the initiative and ambition of pursuing renewable energy projects. And to be honest, it's not about the renewable energy project. It's about what the renewable energy project means for the community in terms of energy sovereignty, self-sustainability, building a local economy, prosperity for the communities, and understanding how it actually builds the nations to where they want to be on a long-term prospect. And so a lot of our work is really driven by communities. So our work is we partner with communities, we partner with utilities, and we operate as a transparent, honest broker. We provide technical results that if the utility has a concern, we share that with everybody. We include that in our studies, share that with everybody. If the community has a concern or ambition, we include that in our studies, share that with everybody. So that way we address the utility's concern through technically rigorous results, but also ensure that the communities have the information that they need to make informed decisions that's in their best interest. None of these projects are mine. All of these projects are the community's project. I do not make a decision. It's their decision. The pride and the ownership in those decisions stay with the community. I'm fortunate to have played a role in them, but they all belong to the community. So we provide technical aspect, and a big part of that is building that trust. These are just some results, just some pictures. I'd be happy to go into them afterwards. This slide is more along the lines of just some communities and Indigenous economic development organizations that have vouched for us, and some of our work. I'll share the slides with everybody afterwards. And Chris, actually, I've updated this to include what Heather Shilton wrote from Nunavut Nuksavti Corporation. Okay. So I'd be happy to share that. She just sent us something earlier last week. So another thing is what we do is through the knowledge mobilization aspect is we help to teach and train the community through a co-developed course. So we've run this with Vantakwichin First Nation in Old Crow and Hamlet Polituk already, where we co-develop in terms of working with the community on what they want to know, how they want to be taught, both in terms of the language, the topics, but also in what manner. Is it on the land? Is it in the classroom? Is it making sure that we address the appropriate audience in a manner that is conducive for their learning? And also identifying specific outcomes. So we have a whole bunch of instructors from other stakeholders as part of their renewable energy projects come and teach. So that way what they're doing is not black booked, it's shared with the community and offers opportunities for growth and employment for youth and community members. So that way we could say, hey, and if any of this is of interest to you, there's an operation and maintenance role with Vantakwichin First Nation as an example. There's an energy coordinator role with Hamlet Polituk as an example. There's many different avenues for this course. And I was in Old Crow last week, and that thermal image was, we were talking about home energy retrofits and energy efficiency. That was a topic that Vantakwichin First Nation wanted to focus on. So that was during one of our home energy audits that we were doing.
So just before you leave if you just go back.
Sorry, I was on the wrong.
No.
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Just go back to the geography slide showing where the community workshops were. Just to note to people, I mean, Michael and I live this, we know this inside out, but she was talking about Heather Chilton. So the Santa Kilowak, which is in part of Nunavut, but it's just beside Quebec and Hudson's Bay. And they're looking to do a wind energy project that she's doing the work with. And there's projects throughout the north, and there's many more than these as well that we're trying to move through with deep diesel penetration. And so just to know, this is a defining part of Canada. And I know with us in Indigenous Clean Energy, we really enjoyed obviously working with the communities and working with Michael. In fact, Michael will be with us and 550 people who are going to be in Toronto next week for the Indigenous Clean Energy Gathering. And Jen, I'll make sure you get an invitation because you're in town. You may want to drop in for an hour or two. You'll have a fantastic time meeting hundreds of Indigenous people doing great clean energy work around the country. So back to you, Michael, because I just love this slide. I'm a failed geographer, really. And whenever I see a map, I want to look at it more. So, yeah.
Oh, I love maps too. That's why I have this back here. But thanks for, actually, one thing I want to notice is for our technical studies, all the communities in green are the ones that we've worked with in the past. The ones in yellow are the ones that we're actively working on right now. And we don't take a relational or transactional approach. It's not that, like, our agreement with Vantakwichan First Nation and Old Crow technically ended in 2018, but we want to take a relational approach. And so we still develop and foster that relationship with them. So even though it shows that it's green and we've technically completed our results, we are continuing to support and work with communities on their ongoing energy transition efforts. And then this map shows the community energy systems courses so that we're planning on running, and the ones in green are the communities that we've run the course in before, but we are planning on going back. And then the ones in yellow have expressed interest in the co-development of a future course in the next calendar year. So that's the thermal image working up in Old Crow. And then, just one last slide on fostering meaningful community relationships is it does require a lot of time. It does require a lot of effort. And sometimes, like, it requires a lot of sacrifice in terms of it's not your problem to solve, or it's not your problem. It's not about you. Doesn't mean, like, I've gone through a lot of professional sacrifice to get to. If you look at my publication record as an academic, it's awful. But that being said, what I find is working with communities, that provides meaning and purpose with the work that I'm doing. That is what I'm doing. And I'm not saying that I haven't benefited from it either. Oftentimes, if I align my success with what the community sees as success, then my success is their success. So they want me to succeed. And in addition, I'm not saying that it's prescriptive. I'm not saying that, and I can't guarantee anything, but I have yet to come across a community where I've done good, meaningful work where they also don't want to see me succeed on a personal level as well. So it does require a lot of sacrifice, and sometimes you have to really prioritize their ambition. But for me, it's what makes the work worthwhile. So that's all I have on my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's great, Michael. Really appreciate that. Open up the group of questions or comments. This is stuff that you may not see a lot of, and also encourage people with the Volt-Age team to come in as well as researchers with Volt-Age and partner universities. Jen, over to you.
So I've got a question, and I guess full disclosure, my parents used to work in Old Crow, so they actually taught me the answer, but but I think it's an important one to kind of really say it explicitly. When we talk about approaching Indigenous communities, especially considering kind of the legacy of settler Indigenous relationships, and my parents had the advantage of being both Métis, so it's a little bit different. They weren't kind of like necessarily like, they were still whitey, but they weren't fully that. But when you talk about trying to engage with people in Indigenous communities, what are some of the sensitivities and things that we need to keep in mind in terms of like a mindset and approach, and just some of the things that we need to be careful of that, a well-meaning person would kind of walk into and fall into and not necessarily recognize that they're basically taking another page out of an old colonial playbook and not necessarily recognizing that. So do you get what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think so. And there's a lot to unravel there as well, which is a fantastic question. if you could see your image on the screen just during this chat, if you look at the person to the left of you, if you look at the person to the right of you, and think, as of 2011, for every 3 Inuit, there's a research paper about Inuit. So think of it like the person in the image to the left, the person in the image to the right. There's a paper about you that doesn't actually benefit Inuit. Now, as of 2011, it's gotten worse. And so there's a lot of historical friction with universities around that, where are they the research topic, or are they the ones who are driving the research? And success isn't just what is done, it's how it's done, in terms of identifying those additional value propositions and understanding whose problem you're trying to solve and what is the legacy of the project. And it's good to have an ambition. Oh, I'm here to help communities. I'm here to work with communities. But is it about your legacy and how you have helped? Or is it really about the community's legacy? I mean, we're all people. We all have egos. We all have legacies that we want to fulfill. But when it comes time to sacrifice, where do you go in? When I started with my introduction of I'm from Toronto, I did that as a more of a relational aspect. From one researcher to another who was born and raised in Toronto, I didn't know what I don't know. And going in with, we have 2 ears, one mouth, using that in that perspective, truly trying to understand and really appreciate the different worldviews. And I'll give an example. If you change the way you see things, the things you see change. When talking about land claim agreements, obviously we're talking about land, right? Because it's a land claim agreement. But when Nunavut when Nunavut had their land claim agreement, Nunavummiut really wanted to ensure that that also covered the ocean. You know, when you talk about negotiations, that doesn't really make sense. But when you think about how they use the land and how they use the ocean in the wintertime, it's one and the same. That's their traditional hunting grounds. It opens up a big can of worms around, ocean sovereignty and that use of the international waters and whatnot. But to even think about it differently, like when you say ocean is obviously not land, why are you negotiating it? But if you change the way you see things and truly appreciate the different worldviews, then it's obvious that it is land. They're talking about the same thing. So you don't know what you don't know. It's also not about you. And every single person that you will meet knows at least one thing that you don't know. And if you go into a community as I'm the expert, like, yes, you can come in with expertise, but there's so much more that you could learn and truly appreciate, truly respect the people that you work with, the community that you work with. I go into communities wearing this suit, and it's not a means of, hey, I'm here, I'm better than you. I do it as a means of demonstrating respect. I want to present my best self. I'm not suggesting that everybody does this. But if I go to a meeting with the premier of the Yukon, I'm going to wear the suit. If I go to a meeting with chief and council in a community, in a First Nations community, I'm going to wear the suit because language matters. If we say First Nation, if they are truly a nation and we treat them as a nation, they deserve that respect. So I do go in saying, if I don't mean to come across a certain way, if it makes people uncomfortable, I will change, but ensure that you are there to serve. You're not there to save, you're there to serve.
Michael, that's so powerfully said. And I'll let Jen, if she wants to add another question to it, but working with Indigenous communities I have for 25 years, I totally get where Michael's coming from. We have a nickname for Michael in the Indigenous world, which you may not even know about, but we actually call him Dr. Waistcoat because he wears a suit with a waistcoat, so we call him Dr. Waistcoat. But he's actually, that's an endearment right now. I don't know what the Inuit particular word for that will be, Michael, but we'll figure it out someday.
Yeah, that would be great. I actually didn't know that.
I was going to say, my mom told me she used to work for the government of Canada, and she did a lot of focus groups, and obviously with some Indigenous heritage, she'd be the one who would be sent up for the focus group. She said the highest praise she ever got was they said, you have some native blood in you. We can tell because you know how to listen. And it was the listening, right? And it was the same thing when I moved to India. to do this rural development. The offer that I took up to go was, I'm like, how do we do this? He goes, come to India, sit on the floor for 3 months, let illiterate people teach you. If you're humble enough to listen to them, you can stay as long as you like. And I think that perspective, right? When I give land acknowledgements in Toronto, I love to point out that the Dish with One Spoon Treaty predates the Magna Carta. Right? Everybody seems to think it was from like the 1950s or the 1980s or 2050, and I'm like, no, guys, it was like 1040-ish. Like before the Europeans thought of having constitutions, we had a constitution here. We're not this like, right? And it's like you have so much more to learn than you realize. And I thought that was just a really interesting perspective of, listening. And it's going to be the same with any community we go into, but I think even 10 times more because of those legacies of white saviors coming in to try and save the community and then turning around and solving the wrong problem or exploiting people as if they're research data rather than actually human beings, or as you say, a nation. So.
That's true. Any other questions for Michael or comments that people might have? I mean, Prague, I know a couple of things. I mean, Michael did put up there. I'll come back to you in a sec, Michael. Prague, I noticed that Michael did have up there EV electrification as part of the ask for one of the utilities. So make sure you got the connections there because that might tell you some of the things. Because Prague is working with the community I've worked with. As you know, I've worked with the community of Inukjuak for over 17 years, Michael, and that's something that we're looking at now is how we electrify transport. So there may be a tie in there. Michael, over to you for your question or comment.
Thanks a lot. Just quickly, again, breaking it a bit down to the proposal writing, and because what I hear from Jen, what I hear from you, and as well confirmed by my own experience, it's like communication is key, right? The way of communication. And I think this is very often underestimated in the proposals, because there it's described the research, the pathway, the milestones and everything, the work packages, but the communication part is, and the transparent with the different stakeholders and so on, this needs really tailored communication, right? And the more partners you have, the more important it gets, as well how you describe it. So might this reflect as well on the, and open question to you, maybe Chris, or as well to Andreas, is this something that needs to be considered and priced in as well in the proposals? Is this evaluation criteria to have time and tools and descriptions for communication?
I'll let Andreas comment first, but then I might add something.
The knowledge mobilization is a very important part of the projects. So we need an engagement strategy with the partners. And then for communication of the results to broad communities. So already we have started, there are some people that have started meeting with an organization called Quest that gave us a support letter. They organize events with municipalities, and I think it's Thomas Walker and Aphrodite met with them. And so that's just an example of an organization dealing with knowledge mobilization, knowledge transfer, and the communication aspect with the broader communities. So I think it's very important. It needs to be described.
Yeah, what I can say is that, I mean, there has been discussion, Michael, in terms of the impact round of grants and proposals for Volt-Age, that the partnership needs to be supported. And that fundamentally, as you highlighted, and Michael and certainly Jen have talked to as well, as communications, interactive communications is a part of that. So yes, I expect that in the way resources can be allocated, there will be an understanding that some of it must go, in fact, to the collaboration of partnerships. And particularly, you know, there's no substitution of being together in person. I mean, these are fine to talk, you know, online, but, you know, I know, Michael, in your travels, you go to communities, and so do I. I mean, I was up in Inukjuak, you know, 3-4 weeks ago. I mean, I'll be up in Nain, Labrador sometime in January, and I'll take my warmest jacket at the time, of course. And so yes, I mean, I think the convening and time together is essential. I think, as Michael, the key thing will be to make sure that you articulate why it's being done. I mean, we all go to meetings, but we all know there are really important meetings and time we spent together. So I think it's the latter that's going to be valued. But Michael, I wonder if you could talk about some of the travels in terms of what that in-person connection means.
If you want me to be honest, this is my only full week in the office between mid-September until the new year. Face-to-face means the world. It builds trust, and trust is built on, like, the way I see trust is, why would anybody trust me? Why would anybody trust another? Is if, let's just say you're going in for a surgery, you're going to ask your doctor because you trust that they are competent in their professional skills, that they're giving the best medicine available. But you're also going to trust your friends, your family, your partner, not because you trust that they know what they're talking about medically, but you trust that they have your best interest in mind. And you can't really build that trust over Zoom calls, over emails. So, like, just as Chris was saying, I've been in many different communities. I was in Old Crow last week. I was in Sambake in Northwest Territories the week prior. I was in Iqaluit in mid-October. I'm there physically when the community needs me, and I'm present. Actually, Chris, to be honest, if you didn't send the email at that right timing, it would have gone into a black hole, because I have thousands of unread email messages because I need to be present. And that is a big struggle that I have, balancing everything out. And actually over the holidays, I'm hoping to catch up on everything. But I truly, truly believe that it's a critical component in building and fostering that trust with not just communities, but even with each other.
No, that's really well said. It's so important. And Michael, I've had only 2 full weeks between the beginning of September and the end of December in Ottawa, so I appreciate. Nicole sometimes have a hard time when I'm in Vancouver or in Nukchuak or in Winnipeg or in Toronto, but that's the reality of it. Michael, I really want to thank you for your insights, and Jen as well as yours. And I know both of you may have to go, but I want to do one final thing before we break here. And I'm going to ask Catherine to give up one example of a example that with positive energy in the University of Ottawa, which all of you might find interesting. So if you can bring up that presentation. And so positive energy was formed about 7 years ago with the University of Ottawa to recognize that how do you build trust in energy transition. And oh no, it's not this one I want, Catherine. It's the one I sent to you just before. And hold on, that's just a minute here. So hold on a second, Catherine. Maybe I sent you the wrong one, so my apologies. Shoot, I don't want to drag on with this. Just give me 1 second, Catherine. I'll track down what I need to track down and send it to you. But Positive Energy is a collaborative at the University of Ottawa that Professor Monica Gattinger has put together. And okay, so I'm sending this to you now, Catherine. You're going to get it in a second. That's what I do when I send things too fast. So just give me 1 second. So Catherine, all the decks I'm sending you, put the deck up that says about positive energy. So in energy transition, one of the problems with energy transition is that the public doesn't trust governments. They don't trust companies. They don't trust technology. And we see some of that pushback now in terms of, and now affordability comes into the game. People saying, well, we can't move as fast on this, or we can't deal with transitions that we've had as much as we can, or we can't approve certain projects. You see oppositions to wind projects, or you see oppositions in terms of people saying, well, how will critical minerals be used in solar power, for example, and batteries? What does that mean like? And so these are some of the questions that happen. And so University of Ottawa said we need a collaborative called Positive Energy to try to understand what we do not know about that, what the public's saying, and how in the transition to a clean energy future we recognize how to build trust is an essential part of this. And so this collaborative was formed. And Catherine, did it come through at all? So it's all hung up there. My apologies here. And so I can just speak to it. And if it comes through, you can bring it up, Catherine. And so Positive Energy is a collaborative that is funded by around 7 or 8 different corporations, but includes government, includes NGOs, includes civil society, includes Indigenous organizations. It includes people that you mentioned, for example, Andreas, like Quest. It includes Indigenous Clean Energy, which I represent. It includes the First Nations Major Projects Authority as well, which is out west in particular that Michael knows. And so what they do is they say, okay, and the question that Positive Energy asks is that where should we invest in building trust? They do polling regularly where they have Nick Nanos, the major pollster, to do polling along the way. And what Positive Energy has been able to do by doing that is it influences how policy is developed. Thanks very much. We'll flip to the next 2 slides. One further. Next one. Great. And you'll stop there. So back one. And so this is what it's done, is really strengthening confidence in policy and regulation so that understanding that if public's not involved and informed, then it becomes an obstacle to some policy. So look at the carbon tax, for example. There's oppositions to that. So they've had these 3 phases of research. So you see it's gone on since 2015. It continues now to at least 2027 and beyond. And the way it works, and I'll go to the next slide, Catherine, is that they come to us. So I've been on the advisory council of Positive Energy from the start, as have around 30 or 40 other people from organizations I've mentioned. But you see the range of financial supporters in this space. It's significant. And then the polling partner, and then you've got Indigenous partners. And so what we're able to do is that we shape what research is done. And so very much to what both Jen and Michael have said, what's the why? Why should universities do this? So that while the university has faculty that's in this area and they have resources for those faculty to do research, they respond to the direction from a multi-sectoral community that's giving them direction going forward. I'll go to the next slide, Jen, Catherine. Yeah, so therefore, the university will come forward saying, here's where we think research is going. We actually do peer review from the advisory council, which I sit on at Positive Energy. We have public events where the research, the possibility of research is tested. And we actually do polling. So we actually are getting the public involved in saying, is that something that what the public sees? And then the results of both the review process, the eventual research, and the polling leads themselves into final reports and events. How should regulation evolve? How should we understand how carbon communication is divulged? And so this is the essential nature of Positive Energy. And as you say, the why is again given direction by a council that's multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral. And then the how we do it is shaping it, and research is a response to that. And I think there's one more slide, Catherine, if I remember. And here's the kind of impacts that we have. So therefore, it's recognizing that policy is an implicit part of the change process. And Michael, you said in your remarks that your work informs policy, and absolutely true. And so the question is, you need to inform policy, but then you have to be proactive about informing policy. I would hope that we see with the impact around proposals that researchers articulate how they're going to inform policies. I should keep back on the last slide. And so by doing this, what we're able to do is to say, okay, we're talking to all energy ministers, or we're talking to electricity transition panels, we're talking to deputy ministers. And so it's very high and influential. And so, I know that from a research outcome standpoint, someone will say, well, we'll do this research, we'll publish papers and things like that. That's all well and good. But the question is, how do you influence the change process? Fundamental decarbonization is both policy at the micro and macro. And if you don't alter policy, it's very hard to make some of the changes to go forward. Michael and I will talk in Toronto next week about some of the policy we have to change and what we need to do to go with deeper penetration of diesel so we are more reliant on renewables and storage. But that requires different kinds of revenue, different kinds of funding, different kinds of policy at the national level and at the jurisdictional level of provinces and territories. And that presentation also goes to energy regulators. So people have to realize is that there's an ecosystem of decarbonization that has to be influenced. And if you're not influencing regulators, you're not influencing governments, you're not influencing politics, you have a very hard time moving what may be a very valid research in very valid projects will not move forward without influencing policy. That's what Positive Energy example gives you. And we'd like to see examples in the impact around proposals where the results of research, the results of a project also shape policy. And I'll go to the last slide. And so you see some of the things going on in there, and it's significant. So this is to also, Jen, if you're still on board, I can't quite see that, is that we've built that ecosystem of partnership so that when we go out there publicly, it's not just University of Ottawa doing it, is in fact all the set of partners doing this. And that's highly influential. So when industry is going to the table and saying, here's how we need policy to evolve, it also allows us to come to consensus points as to what can change. And in fact, where there's not consensus and there's differences of views. So those are kinds of the examples that I want to share about positive energy. So you've had examples from Toronto Metropolitan University, from Yukon University, and from University of Ottawa that I hope we can learn from for Volt-Age. So I'll go off screen now, if you could, Catherine, and just see if there's any questions to me about positive energy and any other closing comments and a bit of a roundtable. All right, so I do this all the time, but we'll do this in about 15 minutes. So we'll actually be in advance of our time. I'm going to pick names and ask you to say, what's your takeaway and learning from this webinar in the work you're doing? So Carolyn Hashem Vamet, I have you first on my screen at the bottom, so I'm going to you. What did you learn? What's your takeaway?
Thank you for picking me up. I actually came a little bit late, so it's a bit still a learning for me. I mean, I learned really a lot, and I have quite a bit of how to say dilemma, like what was mentioned with Jen and Michael. But I'm still very not clear about the things. So I would continue to learn by listening from you.
Great. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to name 3 people in a row, and then you'll go in order. And I'm going to name people who are on the Volt-Age team too, because I think this is part of the learning process. So I'm going to go to Bruno, Imeni, and then Jennifer. Bruno.
Hello. I learned quite a lot. It's amazing. I mean, it's not just about the technique or strategy to approach the partner, but also the mindset. Thank you so much for the webinar. Thank you.
Imeni.
Hi, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I will be really quick because I didn't hear all the session. I was working at the same time, sorry. What I've learned is what Jennifer MacArthur talked about in the connection with all the partners and the researchers, her and the time she gives to connect everybody. That was really interesting for me.
Thanks. Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I apologize, I'm a little under the weather, but I'll do my best. I thank you, first of all, to all of the presenters. I know Jen MacArthur had to drop off, but, you know, Michael, it was great to hear from you. I'm so inspired by your work. And thank you for sharing, Chris, the positive energy example as well. I think for me, it was really driving home the point around putting in the work, doing the work, putting in the time to build those relationships, not rushing that process to really sort of allow for that to happen as it needs to over time. And also really interesting to learn more about, you know, like situating a particular partnership within a broader network. So everybody comes with their relations and their, you know, pre-existing partnerships. And so you're essentially kind of building on to existing partnerships. So not thinking about just that sort of one group to one group, but the broader context in which that relationship is being built. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to go to Andreas and then Nicole and then Prague. Andreas, you're on mute.
I think there are 2 important aspects that we discussed today. Is one, they need to inform policies at the different government levels. That's really an extremely important part of Volt-Age, and it was mentioned in the proposal. Roadmaps. We recently published together with the Canadian Academy of Engineering a roadmap on the integration of renewables in the built environment for carbon neutrality, and we touched on resilience. So that discussion is continuing, and we want to influence building codes and also integration of energy storage into the building codes and the grid interaction into the building codes. That's missing. And there are various reasons for that, but it's very important for that to happen, to logically integrate batteries, thermal storage, and other energy storage into buildings. They need to be part of the building code, both the electrical code and the energy code. So that's something for which we are pushing. And also,
I'm going to keep you there, Andreas. I want to get in one thing because I want to get everyone here. So Nicole, next.
Policy, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to all the presenters. I learned a lot. Two of my most favorite things I think that I would say is one, it's not about you, and working with communities is about service and not about taking something from them, but being able to provide something with your expertise. So thank you very much, Michael, for those two very, very good pieces. It's not about you. I'm carrying that through.
Thank you, Frank.
Well, I think for me, it's just learning so much more about some of the projects that are going on and some of the players involved. Right now, I'm busy texting Mike Ross about meeting him in Toronto next week. And this meeting that you mentioned, Chris, next week sounds very exciting, especially Tommy should be there. So for me, it's, I think the general framework of forming the partnerships, I kind of understood, but meeting some of the players was very important for me in this workshop.
That's great. And then Jennifer will be there as well. So Jennifer, you'll be able to meet Michael, and you'll be able to, and I think we might get Jen coming out as well. So now I'm going to go to Simon, Olivier, and Amin Hamad. Simon.
Actually, Chris, I have maybe something to add, if that's okay.
Yes.
I don't know. Well, it's more of a question, but I was thinking that in these relationships that we're trying to establish, we have to put also the interests of the community forward. That made me think of the levels of collaboration that may exist. And I know of this word, which is concertation in French. I don't know if this word also exists in English, but concertation is a higher level of collaboration where you're allowing the community to make the decisions in tandem with you. And collaboration may be a too general term to frame the kind of relationship that we're trying to establish. There's that, and also I was thinking that in establishing these relationships, maybe you can tell me if I'm right or wrong in saying this, but I feel that we're not really asked to just be employees representing an organization, but we're also showing ourselves as human beings first and foremost. And that's maybe, because I'm trying to think, how do we establish trust? What does that mean concretely? And for me, that means to be myself in every interactions that I am establishing, and trying to be as truthful as I can be as a human being. And there, secondly, I can think of the project at hand and our objectives with that.
That's good. No, I think, first of all, your truth is your truth. I won't disagree, but I also do disagree. So we'll go from there. I'm going to go to Simon, and then I'm going to go to Olivier, and then I'm going to Amin Hamad. Simon.
Yeah, I appreciate all of presentation, especially Michael Ross, because it's very interesting that something is done in the electrification of grid network, and it's very important to have the technical advisor in this domain.
Okay. Thanks, Simon. Olivier.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, it works. Thank you very much to all the speakers for this meeting. On my side, or closer to my work, what resonated most for me was the importance of listening and committing. You can't stop halfway. Indeed, like, I didn't know about Michael's work, like when he said that he needed to be in person and meet with people and show respect. It resonated a lot. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Monsieur Olivier. Amin Hamad.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. Excellent workshop, and we learned a lot. And thanks for all the presentations. So actually, I have a question about the timeline when do we expect to have the proposals or the letter of intent? I think we were talking about something happening in November, but it seems now it's not happening.
It's soon. It's soon. I mean, Hamad, it would probably be, I think, I'd say give us outside 3 weeks that where the criteria will be out. But we'll know more after the scientific committee meets on Monday.
Okay. And do you have any like approximate deadline for the actual full proposal so that we can better coordinate with the partners?
Sure. It's probably looking towards February. I've been trying to stretch it to March, but we'll see. There's a negotiation year. I wish we had more time. So, but part of this is also because it's important to bring students on board in the right time frame. But I don't want to say give you a firm name. We'll have that very, very soon.
Knowing that we will have the Christmas break also, so
yes,
I mean,
we will.
the
Yes.
assumption is that we have at least half of the proposal already written, and we have the commitment and everything already happening now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you can have Christmas Day off, but work all through the holidays apart from that. So just joking.
I'm talking like the partners may not be available.
No, that's true. I'm going to go to Kat, Michael, and Andrea.
For me, it was two main things that have also been mentioned by some of my colleagues. But first, thank you so much, everybody, for all the wonderful presentations. It was a very impactful workshop for me, at least. So the two main things that I learned: service, not saving. That was a very apt way of putting it, Michael. Thank you for that. And the value of listening, and also it's not really something that forming these partnerships is not something that you can really do on Zoom. So you need to be present and you need to put in the time, and also the sacrifice that comes maybe to your personal career as well. So that was really.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thanks a lot for the fantastic presentations as well from my side, and nice to meet you again, Michael. I learned basically it's never to trust the bankers of the Royal Bank that come in with the helicopter, right? And like I think it's what I heard and learned. It's about a co-creation, the trust building, growing and keeping. That this is basically very important, and this brings me very fast to the topic of I need to discuss very hard with all the partners of what kind of structures we can establish to create something for the long term. And not just to have the one project together and then let's see where it's going, but to think already about a sustainable structure of growing something longer. And I like very much your referral to marriage. Need to think about that, but yes. So it's very much food for thought. Thanks a lot for this amazing workshop, and I think it would be great if most of the researchers would have attended. It's really amazing, the content. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, we do have it recorded, and we shall remind them that according to Michael Bosset, he said this is an amazing workshop, so you better listen to the recording, right? So that's the way it works, right? Andrea.
Thank you, everyone, for the presentations. It was very interesting for me. I think what I'm taking with me today the most is finding the why before the what and targeting that why. Also, I love that you spoke about trust and the partnership trust, and you said that it's almost like a marriage. And also, I found it very interesting that it was said that you're not there to save, you're there to serve.
Thank you very much. I know Alison stepped away from something else, but if she comes back, she'll gotta go. But Michael, what have you learned in your work, not just today, but what's your takeaway from this experience you've had for the last almost 8 years? What's the thing that has changed you?
I guess like the biggest thing that changed me is even changing the perspective of things in terms of there is so much that I don't know, and I'm just humbled day in, day out. And the moment that I think, I've got this, or I understand it, like the moment, once you've seen one Indigenous community, you've seen one Indigenous community. Like they're all very different. And the moment I think, oh, I know exactly how to do this, and the moment I get complacent is the moment I get humbled. And it's easy to be, I get humbled a lot, and it's just, it's incredible that I've been in this space with many different conflicting stakeholders, many different things, but I have yet to meet a person who doesn't want to do good. And that's really, really empowering, really, really like enriching and very motivating for the work that I'm doing. And it's just, yeah, it's what makes everything meaningful and purposeful. So I really appreciate that. And it comes from everybody, like even listening to what everyone is saying here, everybody here wants to do good, meaningful work. And then I'm very, very happy and fortunate to be part of this.
Thank you, Michael. Alison, I know you have to step away, but I want to give you a chance to comment about what you take away from this webinar.
For me?
No, I'm going to Alison. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
But
sorry, yeah, we're in the midst of, we're talking about live creation of something. This is so exciting because we're in the midst of developing the impact call, and this workshop has really confirmed a lot of the feelings and a lot of the elements that we have found are such central core values for Voltage and the work that we want to do. It's really empowering, and I really think, Michael, your description and Jen's as well about remaining humble, fostering respect, and ensuring that you understand your positionality and that we are really trying to work together and serve a greater cause and serve other communities. Those are just such valuable takeaways that I think that really sets the tone for what we're trying to do going forward.
Thank you all. First of all, I mean, Carol, to your comment, we are all humans, and I think we need to recognize that. And I want to thank you all for your humanity. I think if we can strive to be more the people that we are, the people we want to be in the research work that you do as university researchers and the work that people like me do in the community, the further we will go on that. And I will say this, is that we won't get this perfect, but the more we can keep talking about this and involving other universities like UConn University and the University of Ottawa in this will help us get further. And I would note that we are ending earlier than the time. Yeah, so I want you to make a promise to me. I don't want you to look at your email after you finish, we turn off the Zoom call. I want you to stand up and just move around for 5 minutes because we're all sitting down way too much. And if you want to go have a cup of tea or if you want to go outside, do that, because part of being human is taking care of yourselves too. But I want to express my gratitude for all of you being here today and taking the time. Please let your colleagues know, and certainly the Voltage team will let others know that this is available to listen to as a recording. And we'll have much more to share in the weeks ahead. And some of the projects will move ahead and be funded, some won't. But I do have confidence that, as you phrased, Michael, the desire for all of us will do good, will make us all not only do good, but we'll do more and we'll do it better. Thank you for all your time together today, and I hope our paths cross soon. Have a good afternoon. Go have a cup of tea.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.